Spacefarer. Welcome to WTUFO. I hope you're enjoying watching or listening. If you'd like to support the show directly, you can do that at patreon.com/WTUFO, patreon.com/WTUFO. That will help increase the chances that the show continues to exist. If you're listening on a podcast player, you can also rate and review us. That'll help the algorithm know to tell other people about us. And likewise, if you're on YouTube, you can like and subscribe. And finally, if you're really digging it, you can post us on your favorite social or put us in a thread to your friends. Just kind of helping us spread the word, since we're a new show, is extremely useful and a valuable contribution to our mission. So thank you so much for engaging. I hope you enjoy the episode. What the UFO? I'm speaking with Alejandro Rojas. Alejandro, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to meet you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Alejandro is a UAP researcher and writer. He's a consultant at Enigma Labs, and he's the CEO and founder of UAP Discovery. So would you like to speak briefly about your role in this world and what you are focused on right now, just to start?
Sure. Yeah. Traditionally, I've kind of been a UFO historian, writing articles about all the happenings in the field for the last 20 odd years. However, my passion is really in science, because, you know, as a journalist, you want to write about what's credible or what's out there. But I also have a passion for discovery, like figuring out what the heck's going on. And I don't think we're close to that yet. I think we're getting started now. And that's really exciting. But the space for real fruitful work is kind of diminished because of all the conspiracy. And so I'm really fighting to open that up. So that kind of gets me onto Enigma and UAP Discovery. So with UAP Discovery, I'm trying to create a space that is focused on data collection and analysis, and mostly crowdsourcing that, but from scientists, from citizen scientists in a credible scientific way. The reason I think that is so important is that that's really where we're going to prove anything. You do come from a scientific perspective as skeptical, but that's important. So for instance, as you may know, if you're writing a scientific paper, you're arguing the null hypothesis. So in other words, you're arguing that you're wrong. But the key is, if you can prove that that all of these, that you're wrong about being wrong, that you can't prove that your theory is wrong, then there's something to it. And that's the same thing that goes on with the UAP world. We need to be critical. We need to be skeptical and shoot down anything that isn't substantial, or that substantiates your argument. And that just makes us stronger, so we can figure out what it is. And I try to tell people who get frustrated with that, you know, if you believe you know what's going on, then this effort will only prove you right. And so where is that data collection happening now? Enigma Labs. Enigma has this amazing app that is free. People are uploading hundreds of videos. I'm uploading a video today on my top 10 UFO videos from 2024 that we've collected at Enigma. And that's why Enigma is so important, is right now it's kind of the most important place where we're collecting data on UAP.
That's really cool. And I remember hearing you say elsewhere that you curate a selection of these videos with your now discerning eye to highlight stuff that's genuinely unusual. And you've developed some expertise at, you know, debunking is a strong word, but informing people of what might not, in fact, be an anomalous event.
Right. And it is debunking. And it's, you know, one of my things, especially with words, is that often words will be demonized. But I'm all about reframing that word, sticking with that word, especially if it's the right word. And debunking is the right word. So I'm not as afraid of it. Even when it came to UFOs, you know, I was against moving to UAP because of the baggage that UFOs come with. But just because the public doesn't understand the U in UFO means unidentified and not alien, it means we need to do a better job of educating people of that. And the same goes for UAP, because that baggage, just like I suspected with UFO, has come to the term UAP. So when people say, what's a UAP? The answer is it's a UFO. So the baggage still comes along. And a lot of the general public is so confused because they don't understand that UFO, UAP does not equal alien. It means unidentified. Aliens is one potential answer, but in a host of many potential answers, some of which is common in science, we can't even fathom or conceive of.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I like keeping UFO in the mix because it refers to a specific subset of UAP, which is objects that are flying. But I also like UAP because it embraces kind of a larger vision of things that could be underwater, or maybe things that aren't objects, or question mark.
Right.
Because as you say, there's a lot of wild and wonderful stuff here. I'm curious what of the videos that you end up highlighting and feeling are like genuinely anomalous, are you seeing some form factors that pop up a lot? Are they some of the classic from UFO history, like triangles and orbs, etc.?
Yeah, great question. And I do like to think of it as one of the ways that I like the definition that Congress and the Pentagon are going with UAP is that it's something not immediately identifiable.
Mm.
And I always consider myself more as the first stage. I'm not credentialed. I don't have a science background. So what I can do is filter out and then say, hey, I don't know what this is, and get that out to the public and researchers so there's more discussion to figure out what it is. The vast majority of videos I can figure out. Some I can't, but if I can't, I often feel like, well, someone will probably figure this out. Because we're looking for that one gemstone. We don't have a video or a case right now where we could say this is definitively anomalous. It does not exist. Not one single case can we prove that. And that's what my goal is to find that case. And I think that that's possible. So when I'm surfacing them, I'm thinking, I don't know what this is. Maybe you can help me figure it out, type of thing. With the ultimate goal of hopefully some scientist saying, wow, this one's really weird. And I've written a paper that I'm going to, let my colleagues look at to help that community effort. And science is a community effort. It's a scientific community that comes to a consensus. It's not one person's effort or one person's belief. So that's what kind of has to get booted up and what I like to work on. But to answer your question about the form factors, I think what has always seemed to be most common are lights in the sky, usually at night, that kind of seem to be a satellite, but zigzag or move strangely. And a couple of my favorites are just like that. In fact, one of them is one light comes on, then another light comes on, and then another comes on, and a group of lights kind of come on, go away, move around in a weird way before disappearing. And the number 2 video looks just like that in my top 10 for 2024. And I've seen something like that. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out what that is. So I'm really excited that we've got that nighttime video. And my number 1 video for 2024 is a daytime video like that. So that one's really exciting. I mean, I would love to get like a triangle or something, because historically, even with very credible witnesses, those seem to be situations where an object is really close and hovering there for a period of time. There's several cases where police officers, for instance, have said have had these experiences, but we don't have any videos like that yet. There was a promising one from Belgium from the 90s. Unfortunately, that turned out to be a hoax, but I think it's possible. We're not getting really incredible triangles yet, though.
Have you, just because you mentioned police officers, have you had any body camera footage get uploaded to Enigma, or come across any in your other work?
You know what? I have not. I just did an interview yesterday with Telemundo, and they asked me about that case in, I think, it was in Las Vegas, where the kid said he saw an alien. But nothing really showed up on the body camera footage. I think there was somebody who said, oh, you can see an alien in this footage, but all I see are shadows and light. I don't see anything resembling anything like an alien. So we haven't yet, but I'm hopeful that, in fact, with UAP Discovery, the nonprofit I started to data collect, there are a couple of groups of individuals I'm focused on to help them with data collection. And one of those is law enforcement, because they are, in my experience, one of the first people called. And they're usually, or I should say, there are many times where they're open to looking into it, like the Las Vegas case, but they don't know what to do with the data or what to do with that information. So I want to help train them to learn how to record and who to get that information to.
Wow, that's really cool. So can we talk a little bit more about UAP Discovery? Is that the core of its
Definitely.
mission, empowering different agencies to collect data better?
Exactly. It is about openness and transparency as well, which I think is really important, and it is important for science to happen. But to work with groups like police to be able to have a place where they can network with other law enforcement. I've already kind of started an effort like that called UAP PD, where there are some local police officers who have kind of organized a couple of them to do lectures and help collect that sort of data.
Cool.
And it's on my site where I've got this form, and I want to do more outreach to give them kind of support, because the information out there is really confusing. We also learned recently that the FBI has a group that is looking into UAP, but from a law enforcement perspective, the way I understand it, and I have had some interactions with people asking me for information for some of these guys, but the way I understand it is very loose. So in other words, different FBI offices have been tasked with, hey, look into these UAP. They could be, drones in secure airspace, or illegal activity going on with drones. And that's their primary interest. So they have talked to each other, the people getting involved with this. They've talked with UAP researchers. And the article kind of informally called them a working group. So it's not like a UAP program was put together. It's more that, each individual office was tasked with looking into UAP.
And that's within the FBI, you're saying?
Within the FBI. So that's an example of where they need help, where they're like, well, I don't even know where to start. What's the kind of stuff you're getting?
Yeah.
How do you begin to figure out what is what? And so that's kind of interesting. And there's other law enforcement that I think need that kind of help. And we need more coordinated efforts, and we need these organizations to not feel shy or embarrassed about it, but to tackle it like any other effort, to make sure there aren't illegal drone activities going on, but to also collect any data when something's really unusual.
I heard you mention in another interview that it's even important that we feel comfortable with things being debunked. Like, I think you told a story of some pilots feeling bad that they'd reported something that turned out not to be anomalous. And you said, no, that's great. We need to know.
Exactly.
And you should feel comfortable bringing this stuff forward.
Yeah. So a lot of my YouTube's been dormant for the last almost year, and it's starting up today. But but a lot of my focus was on pilots and on what they're seeing. Again, UAP Discovery has a portion where we want to work with pilots. But exactly, there was this big buzz going on, and it got in the media. Look at, pilots are getting these UFO videos, and they all look pretty similar. And even my buddy Ben Hansen, who did a lot of the analysis of those videos, was kind of bummed and embarrassed to say, oh, it turns out that a lot of these are Starlink. And some of the pilots got upset, and some of them felt really embarrassed, and they were like, I wish I never would have said anything or put my name out there. But exactly, they shouldn't, because what they did was really important, because they discovered an anomalous phenomena. None of us knew what it was. We were able to have researchers, citizen scientists investigate it. And then this very valuable information that this sort of phenomena is actually Starlink satellite, which look really weird when you're 40,000 feet in the air. That's information the FAA should have and should be letting people know. I think Aero just recently wrote a paper on something similar to kind of notify people. But, it had to happen from citizen scientists first, because there weren't people paying attention to this. So it's very valuable, that information that those pilots provided. And had they not done that, we wouldn't have known. So yeah, they certainly should not feel embarrassed. In fact, they should feel very proud that they were able to be a part of this discovery.
Do you agree that pilots need more of a centralized mechanism to report these things? And is there anywhere that you see that going right, like other countries that do this well, or small craft organizations or something?
Yeah, so we definitely have a problem. I've written a blog for Enigma, and I've put it out there, and I did a podcast on this, and it's something Ben and I talked about. But yeah, if you go look, if you're a pilot and you go look, what am I supposed to do to report UAP? The FAA website says contact your tower, or if it's something that's really important, like and you fear for your life, wait till you land and call local law enforcement. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Then you have Aero saying that they're getting stuff from the tower, but that they want pilots to use this weather phenomena website, which that is nowhere. Pilots do not know this. I've spoken at Oshkosh recently, which is the largest. I've done that for the last couple of years, which is the largest kind of aviation event. You know, hundreds of thousands of people go to this thing and talk to people. They don't know that. They don't know where to report. And then beyond that, you know, we have the NASA panel, which is saying we should use this other system that we have where they're supposed to report, you know, other sorts of safety issues. And then that goes to NASA for analysis. I agree with that 1,000%. That's the system we should be using. And there are a lot of pilots who have taken it upon themselves to report to that system.
Oh, cool.
The Debrief has an article on this. So it's good they're reporting because that system is open and transparent. Your name can be anonymous, but then anybody can go access that information and look at it. Ben Hansen, my buddy, makes the point, though, that if you're going to report after you have an experience, you have a small window to collect the evidence. And what I mean by that is the radar data and the tower control tapes where they can hear the audio of you guys going back and forth. So they do need help from researchers to be able to know where, first of all, to know that fact that you got to move quickly to get that data, how to get that data, and then where to submit that data. But it does have to be more centralized. The only instance where I can think of a country doing it right would be, and I'm not sure of the status today, but Chile has had an organization, an official UAP research organization called CEFAA. Leslie Kane, a journalist, has written a lot about this, mostly on the Huffington Post. But their group is kind of what Aero was supposed to be now. It's a whole government group where they have access to information from all of the military branches and government organizations. And they say everybody's very cooperative. In their country, there is no question or laughing about whether UFOs are a real phenomena. It's something that they take seriously. And it's interesting because a few years ago, and Leslie Kane wrote a great story on this, they brought everybody together to determine, well, what are the motivations of these things that we're seeing? Are they benevolent? Do we need to be worried? And they came to the conclusion that whenever they're seen, they're off in the distance and don't seem to be hampering, you know, the regular operations of the aircraft. So in other words, don't be afraid. And that was the training that they wanted to get out was if you see one, try to record it, but don't worry or pay attention to flying.
Well, just because we got near this in your answer there, would you like to talk a little bit about some data collection best practices for people who do have these events? Do you have kind of like a short list of questions to ask or of details to record? I thought that was a great point about acting quickly so that you can capture some of the sensor data that will otherwise be deleted. Are there other things that I haven't thought of there?
No, that's great. So, and this is why I'm excited about the Enigma app. I mean, just in, you know, the tools that it provides. So in other words, having an app like that is very important because then you can upload it and you can get that data out there so everybody can see it. That's super important. But along with that, one of the tools that we have in the app, if you go to the camera, first you can use the camera in the app. How that is helpful is that it tells you all the metadata that your camera is recording, because your camera is recording where you are. It's recording the angle of your phone. It's recording the direction that you're pointing. It's recording your elevation. And you can see all of that in our app on the sides. And what's really cool is once you take that video, let's say you're taking it at night, then we will automatically, when you replay that video, you'll also be able to have a window where you can see like the Google map of the area and the movement of your phone. So you can see what was there. What that helps you with is, maybe there's a hill there and that was actually cars on a hill. You'll be able to tell that, or what else might be out there, so that you can help identify what it is. The other tab is an identify tab. And this is like Solarium and Flight Tracker all in one. So it shows you what satellites are out there. It shows you what airplanes are out there, what cosmic information is out there. So you can point your phone around and say, oh, that's a star, oh, that's an aircraft. That's, Flight 632 Frontier, or, oh, this is Venus. So it'll be able to give you all that information so you know what's up there. So all of that information is really important. If possible, it's also important to have your recording device on a tripod, because a lot of people, are like, oh, look at it doing all that weird stuff, but their hand is moving. So as a researcher, it's impossible to tell, is that the phone movement that's causing the movement of the object, or is that the object itself?
Yeah.
So if you have it on a tripod, it helps solve that issue. Of course, it's best just to record. If you don't have a tripod, that's fine, because these things are typically fleeting. And then recording the information in your mind immediately. And this is the one where people get most frustrated, I guess, with me, is that, if you go look at the studies and the data, memory is extremely manipulative. Your memories, once something happens, your brain begins to distort what happened. A perfect example of this is any dinner table in any home where the family's sitting around and, dad says, hey, remember when you tripped and fell over the dog yesterday? And the kid's like, I didn't trip and fall over the dog. You pushed me. Or, everybody has a different memory, and then you're all kind of arguing what happened. And it's embarrassing. I'll admit that, my significant other is usually right most of the time. And I'm usually wrong. So I've learned, even you're like, I could swear that's what happened, honey. And she's like, no. So memory is very manipulated. And so you need to record that stuff. And the reason I say people get frustrated is that this is why witness testimony is so terrible. It's really bad, especially if people are saying, oh, yeah, you know what? That UFO event that happened 30 years ago, I think I might have been a part of that. Unlikely. It's unlikely your memories of what happened 30 years ago are going to be very accurate, especially when it comes to the details. So you need to, and this is why police even say this, they separate people so they can't talk to each other, and they talk to them separately, so that you can't manipulate, innocently each other's memory. There's studies that show, someone will remember something. They'll see a guy in a gray hoodie. And as soon as, all of a sudden someone will say, hey, did you see that guy in the green hoodie? And then all of a sudden your brain thinks like, oh, yeah, that wasn't gray. That was green. That happens. And the studies show it. So recording that information is really important. And then ultimately, and this is what we're really pushing with UAP Discovery also, is to install, if you have the means, or to join a club or a group where as a group you can get better sensor systems out there. So there's a UFO site called UFO DAP, UFO DAP, where there's this engineer, Ron Olch, who creates these systems, and software where, you upload the software, you plug in the camera, and there's a tracking system on the camera. So if something comes into view, it'll track it and record it. And there's even AI, if you keep the software updated, where it can say, okay, that's a bird, that's a plane, so that you can disregard anything that is not strange. One of our top videos from last year was a video from one of these systems. But I don't see a whole lot of those videos right now. So that's what I'm trying to do with UAP Discovery, is open up that world to where they can submit their good videos, and we can all kind of get those out there as well.
Interesting. So let's talk about that broader world of data, since we're there. As somebody who is close to this world, are you Can you tell us about the landscape of databases? Like, are there 2 or 3 really big ones, or is it like a few hundred smaller ones? And I know SCU has done some sort of congregation of this information, and I've heard you say elsewhere you help SCU get going. So maybe you have some insight on that, or some visions for how the data field could evolve.
Yeah, it's really it is one of the difficult areas. There's lots of small databases out there, but they're just sitting there. And not many people know about them, and so they're not very active, so they're not really collecting data. And then there are more robust systems out there, let's say, that people are reporting a lot to. That would be Enigma. I think we're on the top right now. There's also MUFON and NewFork, of course. NewFork gets in the media a lot because that data is easy to access, but none of these are ideal. So NewFork, that is easy to access. There's just not a lot of data there. I mean, it's very short descriptions, and it's a one-man show. Some guy putting this stuff in a spreadsheet. So an extremely valuable service that they've been providing for a very long time, and they were first on the scene when it came to online reporting. Because when I joined MUFON as eventually as a director and as a field investigator, we weren't even online yet in the 90s. So NewFork was way ahead of us. And then James Carrion, the director, finally, who was an IT guy, focused on getting us online. The problem with that is the data is not very accessible. Unless you're a field investigator, you can't really access that data. So there's a problem with that system. Even with Enigma, there are limitations to accessing the data. You can access all of the data, but in chunks. It's not ideal for like a researcher looking overall, but they are working on those tools to do that. And you'll notice the app does get updated on a regular basis, and there's more search for it, because that's one of the things I'm always pushing, more search functionality. So there is more search functionality being added to the app on a regular basis, and there are plans to add even more search capability in the future in other ways. So it's definitely top of mind over there. It's already, I think, good, and it's just going to keep getting better. Some people, though, are hesitant of working with a for-profit, but I can tell you, for people who have concerns, is data not getting out there. If you go submit your sighting, within an hour, you'll see it on the app. And we're trying to get that down to 10 minutes. And you may in 10 minutes. I moderate at times myself. So we all do at the office, actually, to get those approved as quickly as possible. The only things that we're trying not to get out there for the most part are hoaxes or just, gobbledygook that people put in there, to make fun of the effort or whatever. So you can see that transparency yourself. Just by going in there and putting the data in there yourself. SCU, and this is a problem with the science side of things, they want to create more robust and better databases, which is a good effort that serves real scientific research. And I'm all for that. The problem is these groups are usually pretty niche, and when they roll out a system, nobody knows it's there.
Yeah.
The advantage that Enigma has is that as a for-profit, we've got dollars that we put towards marketing. I would probably say most our dollars are put towards marketing, so we can get the word out there. And that's what these nonprofits or smaller groups don't have. So that's why I'm trying to be a mediator with UAP Discovery, which is to bring attention to these other databases, and help that scientific need, but at the same time, couple in all of this great data that we're getting from Enigma, so we can begin that analysis right now. Because who knows, one of these videos that I post today in the best 2024 may be the key. It may be a video of something genuinely anomalous that a scientist can look at and begin to make some conclusions based off of it, or at least be able to kind of outline the characteristics of a particular type of phenomena that we can then build sensor systems to be able to get the sort of data to understand that phenomena better.
Are we at a point where interoperability is coming up as a topic among these various database operators? And is that part of your mission at all at UAP Discovery?
Absolutely. In fact, that was kind of one of my main roles with SCU, because SCU has been around longer than, the mainstream interest in this topic. And the scientific kind of niche is a very small one. So we're kind of this small group of nerds over here looking at this from a scientific perspective. But as things blew up, so did scientific interest, which is great. And my role has been, because a lot of this field can feel very territorial. They get upset. What are they're going to come in and mess us up? They're going to come in and mess us up. What do they know about this? I have the opposite perspective, where I want to embrace every organization, Aero, NASA, everybody getting involved and working together towards this effort. It's certainly fair to criticize each other when we have to, but we also want to be good partners and do that in a constructive and respectful manner, I believe, which we've seen very little of, I feel like, from the traditional UAP community. So I've always been an advocate, and with SCU, we opened up our arms to the Galileo Project, to UAPX, to all of these other groups that were starting to come up to do scientific investigation. And I think that's been a secret of our success, because then we've been able to work with the AIAA and with the ASA and with Galileo and UAPX and all these other acronyms of these groups that have popped up, and work together to help each other write papers, do research. And I think that personally, SCU has been a shining example of, at the very least, being able to organize and keep people focused. So yeah, and then I want to take that even further to start to include, NASA and Aero and others, because I feel like what the UAP Discovery is a perfect model for NASA, and something NASA can do safely, and that would be productive, because a big part of UAP Discovery is STEM. I think that I personally feel, and there's a great article that was written from this UFO symposium from 1970, 71 that was hosted by Carl Sagan, that was written by Thornton Page, a guy who you might have seen him in the old photos, because he headed a Robertson panel where he's got a patch. But it's this great article about how you can use UFOs to get kids interested in science. And he even tried it. He put together a science class based on UFOs. And the point was, if you investigate UFOs, we need to understand then, propulsion. We need to understand, velocity, all of these physics. We have to understand, if something lands, and we need to understand chemistry, geology. And so we had chapters on all of this so they can teach earth sciences and other sciences. And it was extremely successful, that he got tons of kids in the class. Every year he was filling up the class. So he just demonstrated, and I think it is a great window. Right now is a perfect time to make, UAP the gateway drug for science, because Lord knows at this time we need science advocacy as much as possible, and we need to be strong and bold with that advocacy.
That's a great idea. I've always loved the concept of bringing kids in at the edge of what we don't know, because I think that's exciting for people to experience.
And they love it. And the polls show that the younger you are, the more into the topic you are. So I think the numbers are showing that it is a perfect thing to use. Of course, scientific community, you can see why they kind of like look down on that. But I think that if they read like Thornton Page's paper, or if they visit my website, they can see how we can do this in a more kind of pure scientific way, where we're not getting into the conspiracies or disparaging other organizations. Instead, we're focused on data collection, building software, building sensor systems, capturing things and analyzing those using math and algebra and geometry. And, I think it's exciting.
We're not too far from kids building sensor systems they could put on the roof of their elementary schools to detect UFOs,
We're there. And that's what I mean. For as much as maybe a couple $1,000s, a fraction of how much maybe a robotics club would cost,
Mm,
or it could be even part of the robotics club.
yeah.
You can get a sensor system and software that is autonomously, grabbing this data that the kids can look at on a regular basis, and then get that data up to scientists who are in the ready to look at that data.
Two directions I want to go with this. One's a little smaller and the other one's bigger. So smaller first. Are there some upcoming pipeline developments for Enigma that would use other aspects of phones? I spoke to the Tedesco brothers a few months ago, and they mentioned that a lot of people don't know your phones have more sensors than you would think, and you could even use many smartphones as like rudimentary Geiger counters, for example. And I was wondering if there were any sort of sensor functionalities that you would love to see in the pipeline a little down the road, either in Enigma or another UAP app.
I think that we are utilizing the sensors. Because the problem is with some of these other sensors, the phone is not built for that. And that's a big thing that Arrow's talked about. Is so far the data we've collected are from sensor systems that are not geared towards or calibrated to capture this sort of information. So the data is lacking in that way. Luckily, Arrow is supposedly working on deploying and adjusting, calibrating these sensor systems. The difficulty with that is when it comes to defense and secrecy, there is a need for secrecy in some cases, and I'm not confident that it's going to be very easy for them to share data with the public. That's why I think it has to be more of a public effort. But so that's why I think kind of these outside sensor systems will be important. What the phone is built for is taking pictures, not at a distance necessarily, but the cameras are robust. They get better all of the time. And one of the things that we've done, for instance, so our ideal situation at Enigma would be that people are using our camera and uploading it real time. So in other words, I'm seeing a UFO. Look what I'm seeing right here. Hopefully neighbors see that. They also go outside and take video as well. We've already built a system where if you have 2 or 3 people recording the same thing, the system will automatically triangulate the distance, where that object is, and how fast it's moving and in what direction. So we've already built that ready for that future, and that's what we're moving towards.
That's really cool. So it sounds like you feel like the sensors in the phone that are best suited to this are in action already, and you're set up to maximize their utility.
Exactly.
Okay,
including cool. AI. We are working more on AI identification, and we already use AI on the database side of things.
Cool.
So in other words,
go ahead.
So in other words, if someone puts out a narrative, this is what I saw. Our AI can go in there and say, okay, they saw an orb. It was white. It was going in this direction just from the narrative, and then fill that into the database, into those right places. So then we have a more queryable database, and we can isolate those different characteristics.
That is one of the reasons that I pinged interoperability, as kind of picturing AI tools helping us go through these hundreds of thousands or even millions of sightings over decades to pull out patterns. Okay, so another direction I'd like to go here is I'm curious if you have a feeling about what kind of data will constitute meaningful evidence of anomalous phenomena. And I want to throw the word technosignatures in here because it feels useful to me. It feels like one of the best things that NASA study report does is make the logical claim that it's worth looking for technosignatures in Earth's atmosphere as a logical extension of or contraction of searching for extraterrestrial intelligence in radio signals far away. So I wanted to put technosignatures on the table and ask, I guess, something like, well, just generally, do you have thoughts about this? And then maybe what kind of data would you like to see qualify as technosignatures? And is that a field that you think we need some discussion around?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought up that term because it's kind of fallen off. And technosignatures was kind of NASA and SETI's entry into UFOs in a way.
Mm.
When it was a SETI conference where a scientist had submitted a technosignatures paper, and it was controversial. And of course, then the media got a hold of it and said SETI's looking for UFOs or aliens or something like that, misrepresenting the paper, which is the crux of the issue and why scientists hate the media, because nuance is really important in science. And media get that messed up all the time. And I know this because it's difficult to write science for science, which I've done, but it's very fruitful. It's very, I just get a lot of interaction with the scientists, more than usual when I'm writing about science to make sure I get it right. But to your point, technosignatures are essentially looking for technology, signatures of any technology that is ET, that is not ours. That's why it's in a SETI kind of arena. Luckily, there were a lot of scientists who really championed this effort, and SETI and NASA decided not to run from it, but kind of adopt it. And I'm really grateful for that. However, there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about it. You see it pop up here and there. But to your point, it's really also, in my mind, encompasses UAP because you're looking for signatures of technology. The manner in which it was introduced was, let's say when we go to the moon or Mars, then we should also be looking for any signs of ancient technology that may be under the surface, more of a kind of an archaeological thing. And in fact, we had explored this idea at Open Minds years ago with a scientist. I can't remember his name right now, but he did work for Bigelow Aerospace for a short period of time. He's out of Las Vegas, but he called it, I can't remember what it was. It was, astroarchaeology. But it was kind of similar kind of concept. But his point was, in archaeology, you have to be much more careful than astronauts are when they're recovering a rock or something like that. So we have to develop these protocols and processes. So, and I thought that was a great idea. But to your point, yeah, I think this is the area that we burgeon and we grow in that data collection of what's in our atmosphere or near us is kind of an umbrella, or under that umbrella of technosignatures. So I do think that's important. One thing, though, I think that is a little bit of a misnomer, or at least a misconception when it comes to science, is a lot of people are asking, and I think that somebody posted recently, well, here we have to set up the rules for what constitute evidence and what is going to be the threshold. I completely disagree with that, because the problem is that's not how science works. We don't know anything about the phenomena, so how can we set up any rules around it? So, for instance, if we see a bunch of triangles, these hard objects that are hovering over police, and then they start to get videos of it, and they start to happen more in some areas rather than others, and we need to deploy some sensor system. The sensor systems and the sort of data we want to get from that are going to be different from that phenomena I described earlier of these lights that are coming and going. It's on an individual basis. So what is the threshold? The threshold is just doing your regular scientific process. We've got to get the process going first before we can understand what these thresholds are. And we don't even know what these thresholds are until the scientific community starts debating those. For instance, the Mars rock that is still debated to this day. When Clinton came out in the 90s and said, we discovered ET life, evidence of ET life in this Mars rock. And then soon after that, it was debunked. But it wasn't completely debunked. It's still debated to this day that that rock may represent ET life, extraterrestrial life. And why don't we know for sure? Because the thresholds are not agreed upon. There are no thresholds. It's a kind of scientific community. And right now, the community is leaned towards, it's probably something, when the rock hit the earth thousands of years ago, that's probably where these, what looks like little critters got on these rocks. So they're probably Earth critters, not Mars critters. And that's kind of the crux of the argument. So until we get, start to explore, that's where we'll start to discover those thresholds. It's just premature right now. We can't say, hey, we met all your thresholds, but you're still saying this isn't real. Scientists have every right to say, yeah, but at the time we didn't know XYZ. And that's where my argument is. You're not holding, there are some areas that we couldn't have predicted where there's problems with the evidence you're presenting. And what does that usually mean? You just got to do more science. You got to do more work. And I think that is a concept that is foreign to a lot of people, but not foreign to scientists. Scientists are very, very hardworking, and they're workaholics often. And if you don't prove something with your paper, every scientific discovery has been like this, whether it's Einstein, Tesla, Edison, whoever. You just got to do more work and keep working until you have more data and you have a more solid argument.
That's so interesting. I think great example of the triangle. So say we start getting some really good video of them, then we might move on to wanting really good sensor data of other kinds. Like we want concurrent radar data, and then we want concurrent infrared data, and maybe eventually we want like information about the materials in some way. And
exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly. Let's say infrared is no different. Very similar to what we get in a regular solid craft when it comes to triangles. But then when we use infrared on these lights that are moving around strangely, we observe there's actually way more lights there that we just couldn't see without the infrared. It just demonstrates how those two phenomena, you would use sensor systems differently.
Something that Tedesco brothers have mentioned is that they've observed some objects that seem to move between kind of like wavelengths. So something they would see on one kind of sensor could disappear on that sensor, but remain visible on another sensor, or kind of shift between areas of detectability, which is fascinating and challenging for the scientific project.
It is. And it's another reason why this is such a hugely multidisciplinary topic as well, because you do need experts in every area. And in a recent PBS special, What Are UFOs, that I was fortunate enough to be a part of.
Yes, congratulations. People should watch this. This is on Nova. You can find it on PBS.
My favorite documentary in this field, personally. But, even the debunkers did a great job in demonstrating how FLIR works, and people wouldn't know that. So things can disappear in FLIR and reappear because it's measuring heat, and heat changes. And there's all this nuance when it comes to science, where that's why you got to stay in your lane when you're a scientist, and you got to rely on other experts. And it is similar to journalism, and that's why I think I really love it. And although I was a science major in high school and I wanted to be a rocket scientist, but then went over to journalism. But the similarity is that you rely on expert opinion and expertise and facts, and all of that's really important.
I wonder what you think about this. There seem to be two big important lines here, and maybe the second one is fuzzy, but one of them is just whether there's enough data to suggest that it's worth looking for more data. And then the second fuzzier line is there enough data to make some claims about the nature of these objects that we're witnessing? And it seems to me like some of from within the UFO world, the first line does not seem like much of an interesting discussion, but in the broader scientific world, it clearly still is. You've mentioned elsewhere that the NASA study received some really unfortunate abuse for investigating this territory, and members of your own team on Enigma have elected to remain anonymous, partially because they come from the tech world and there can be blowback. Famously, the CEO of Enigma did an anonymous interview with The Economist last year.
Yeah, exactly. And, people don't realize every organization, including MUFON and SCU, there are people in those organizations who choose not to use their real name. Even some prominent people in both organizations in leadership roles. And I've always been very pro that, because the way I put it is I would rather have their participation than not. And their science and data doesn't need a name. It speaks for itself.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that's an honorable position. I did want to push you, I guess, gently, not you're a public figure, but I would love to push them and just say that there's there's kind of a bullying aspect to the stigma, and
Mm-hmm.
when we decline to stand up to bullies by, refusing to go public, we sort of empower that a little bit more. And one of the best parts again about the NASA study was just saying, we think this is worth checking up on, and this is how we would do it. And people probably broadly misunderstood the NASA study as something that looked into UFOs when it really just discussed how you might go about that. But I just want to circle on this subject of what I've been calling a consensus of curiosity as a goal, not the ultimate goal, but one goal within the field of science, and just put the question to you: how do you see our progress on this? You think we're moving in a good direction, and do you see that as a part of the project of investigating UAP?
Yeah. So this is another great question. I'm loving your questions.
Thank you.
But at that level, I think that you're right. That's not what people are recognizing, is this even a phenomena worth investigating at all?
Yeah.
And I think, not too long ago, there was a resounding probably not. But I do know personally, working through SCU, there were a lot of people in the closet, a lot of scientists. Like I said, and I don't, there were a lot of scientists we were working with who did not want it publicly known that they were working on the topic. Now there are more of them that are feeling more comfortable with getting their names out there. But, it's also how much drive you have. So, for instance, that NASA panel, and this is where I would answer your question to say, yes, we've made great strides in a positive direction, because that NASA panel said it's worth it. And I'm so overjoyed. And that alone is extremely important that they came to that decision. However, they're also saying, although it's worth it, the negativity and the attacks, that the bullying that I faced, don't make it worth it for me to do anything about it. And that's what's happening in the background. Are they going to be motivated to take this on? And I don't think, people realize how bad it is. I've had, and I won't say who, but names that people would recognize on the show, where they're sad. They're essentially having an emotional breakdown because they're like, my kids are reading this, and my kids coming home and saying, Dad, are you a this or a that? And I don't even want to say what they're being accused of, because it's some of the worst stuff you can think of. And, imagine a parent having their kid come home and ask them some of these crazy stuff because they're reading that's what these people are saying online. I mean, is that worth it? Heck no, for a lot of these people, especially if they're doing other scientific endeavors where they're making progress, where they don't have to face this sort of scrutiny. So it's a really unfortunate situation. So I feel like I feel like I'm going to stand up and be the face of it. Beat me up all you want. I'm used to it. In this field, you're either the hero or you're the villain. And we all go back and forth on that. It's really funny because for the longest time, Robert Bigelow was the biggest villain in this field. But in the last few years, he's like the biggest hero. Even when Elizondo came out, I was getting a lot of heat just for covering it because he was the big villain when he first came out for those first couple of years. Now that's switched, and he's a big hero for a lot of the believer community, I guess I should say, or that community. So yeah, you have to face. But I can't. I can sympathize with those who don't want to do what I do. The type of vile kind of hate that comes at you on social media, I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to take, and we can just see how other public figures like stars deal with it. I mean, they go through a lot of emotional trauma because of what people are saying about them online. And I don't know. I try to just not look at it. Even at work, they're like, "Did you see someone made a new meme of you?" And I'm like, "No." And sometimes I'm like, "No, I don't want to see it," or I may just shut down my website and everything and walk away. It is difficult to deal with. So that's one of the hard parts. But to your point, getting back to the conversation, that's where I'm struggling, because I'm still fighting the fight that it's worth it, and I wish people realize that's a fight that's still out there. Luckily, NASA's on my side of the fight, at least on paper, but not in action. and hopefully we can change that over time. And that's where I'm arguing, let alone, whether or not we've been able to demonstrate some sort of anomalous phenomena. And this is where I do kind of differ from some of my SCU colleagues, in that I do not believe at all that we've made that. We haven't. We've got a lot of smoke. We've got a lot of anecdotal information, but we don't have one, video case that we can point to and say, this is demonstrably anomalous. So that's what we still need to get. We still need, some cases with some sensor data, some equipment, data to back up some of this, some of these anecdotal stories, or, with autonomous systems, get that all by themselves without the need of even a human involved. So, I think it's doable. That's what I'm excited about, because I am convinced that it's worth it. I think that many of these anecdotal stories, especially the hundreds that you can find in the unidentified cases that the Air Force investigated with Project Blue Book, those cases are extraordinary. There's really great cases with military, with police officers. I would very, very much, I think the most important book people can read is Captain Ruppelt's book. He was the guy who started Project Blue Book in 1952. His analysis of what happened during that time and the cases they studied, it shows there's a lot of great cases out there. And that's what drives me, that, if we would have had some camera systems or sensor systems in those areas where those happen, even right here in Phoenix in 97, with the Phoenix lights, if we would have had more robust systems to capture what was going on, maybe we would have been able to cross that other threshold by now to demonstrate, look, there's something anomalous going on. But that's what I'm hoping to do. So I'm in the middle of those two, but still fighting for that. Hey, and still trying to, and that's what UAP Discovery is about, making a safe space, troll-free, conspiracy-free, that is just focused on that data collection and analysis. If people want to do the other stuff, there's plenty of places to do that. But there isn't a place right now to just purely work on that data collection and analysis.
And to that point about the sensor systems, it connects directly to our ability to deploy these systems, connect to our collective curiosity level, because as that goes up, the funding gets easier to access. So I'm curious about your take on this, because it seems to me like one of the most, if maybe not the single most important bottlenecks in this whole area is there's no national science funding for UAP research right now. Even the Galileo project only got like a couple $1 million out of their funders, and I don't think that included Harvard, as I understand. I could be mistaken. So I was wondering what your view of the funding landscape is. Do you think that's an area that's improving at all, or is it a place where we still have a lot of work to do? And can we, do you think, look to public institutions like the National Science Foundation, or are we in a place currently where we're just really going to need to get this started with private funding?
Yeah. The state of grants today is really shaky. So even if you have an extremely worthy project, you might not be getting your paychecks right now. So that makes today's world, in the last week or so, even way more difficult for that sort of side of things. But if we're speaking of a world kind of prior to that, I think there was some room. What was very strange to me, I was invited to a National Science Foundation kind of day-long symposium forum type of thing. And I got on to speak, and it was all conspiracy stuff. And I kind of like countered a couple of the points that were made, because they were saying, oh, we've got scientific evidence that there's an anomalous phenomena here. And I had to say, well, we don't really, but that's our goal, is to get that. I think that's possible. We're collecting data. I think we can get there. And I was pretty much shut down, and they wanted to move on to kind of more of the conspiratorial stuff. And this was ran by someone in the National Science Foundation, to my understanding. So Now we got to remember all of these organizations. You have a lot of characters that are working in there.
Sure.
Even the guy who was one of my mentors, John Schuessler, worked at NASA, and he would hold regular meetings on UFOs. Does that mean that NASA believed in UFOs? No, it just meant that him as a member and some of his buddies liked to talk about UFOs. So he would have like luncheon meetings. So I don't think that represents the entire organization, but it does show there's openness, at least towards the topic, and that's a good thing. So it's possible. You also mentioned Galileo. I think Galileo, though, from my impression, is kind of diminished a bit, at least in membership. And activity. So I'm not sure they know what to do going forward. I know they've deployed some sensor systems, but it's more been like, we'll get in where we fit in rather than putting sensor systems where we think would be optimal. And I'm not sure what sort of data they're getting, but they've done, it'll take some coordination and some movement. But to your point, we just don't completely know. And that's part of the reason I created this nonprofit as well, is to kind of explore that. Would you want to give money to student organizations so they can create sensor systems? Would you like to do that at the university level? Would police stations want to do this, or even buildings at airfields or something like that? So I think that we've got to do the outreach to kind of figure to answer that question. It's just like, if you're going to put money somewhere, where do you put it right now? It would be difficult to know where to put that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess to that question, how do you see these next few years evolving with the broader UFO investigation landscape? Who do you think has the ball, or what organizations excite you the most? And what would you like to see your organizations continue to do?
Yeah, I guess I'm so hyper focused on my organizations. I'm backing my organizations 100%. So,
That's great.
yeah, I'm really excited about growing UAP Discovery. I think it's the right place. It's a very positive direction, that is very encompassing of everybody. And it's all about curiosity and exploration and empowering everyone to be able to take it upon themselves. And that's one of my frustrations throughout the years with the UAP topic, is everybody, a lot of people like to sit around and talk and debate. But hey, get out there and do something, get out there and deploy systems, get out there and research stuff. I'm in the field all the time. Now I got my Starlink, so I can connect to the internet anywhere. But, I'm out in the field, researching, interviewing. When I was younger and more into other paranormal topics, I was Bigfoot hunting and ghost hunting, and unfortunately never was able to capture any real data on any of those things, but trying and working with other scientists and people who were interested. And that's when I started, and also covering and writing about them and interviewing them. So I think we got to do more doing than talking, and especially than arguing, because X especially has become just this place where you go trash people, and the things people say are just so bad, or accused of. Just this morning, we were, a colleague was embroiled in some controversy that we've got to kind of straighten out. So, So yeah, more doing, and that's what I hope to accomplish. And people may think that it is a bit elitist or something, because we're only focused on this one thing, but it's not that way at all. Absolutely anybody who wants to come in and focus on this one topic in this space, this one effort, is more than welcome to do so. And if you believe aliens are here, if you believe the Andromedans are coming and talking to people, well, then we're going to help you prove that by gathering this data and getting this information. And you can help do that as well by gathering this data and doing it in a manner in which we can get the scientific community involved and convinced and working for this effort. It's all doable. We just have to treat each other respectful and be focused. And if you want to go talk about, your communications with the Andromedans, there's plenty of Facebook or X spaces where you can do that. we just don't have this space right now. It's kind of what I used to say with MUFON, because at MUFON we used to be more along these lines when I actually was in charge of PR and everything. And that used to be our message, is that if you want to talk about Bigfoot and ghosts or other alien stuff, plenty of places to do that. But we're focused on collecting reports and analyzing and investigating those reports. MUFON took the decision to kind of go more broad and populist and include all these other topics. And that's kind of was the impetus for SCU, because a lot of that scientific group that was mostly headed by Robert Powell, who I know you've had on the show, moved over to create this group. And luckily I was, like you said, able to be involved with that, encourage that group, help that group, do PR with that group. One of the first members, and I've been a board member on and off for these years too, depending on my availability. So I hope people like that message and it resonates. I'm perfectly comfortable with UAP Discovery, even just being a smallish core group, but we're going to be a focused core group. And I have a lot of confidence that we'll come up with results, and there'll be results that'll move us all forward. And I'm super excited about that. And I'm really excited about the possibility of getting NASA involved. I've been able to spend lots of times at NASA facilities, interviewing astronauts and NASA employees. And I am such a huge fan, because they're all brilliant, they're all kind, they're all wise. Some of the best people work for NASA and in NASA, and their involvement, I think, would speak volumes, but also aid us in a tremendous way. But what they're not going to do is get involved with, this negativity. And I love that sort of atmosphere that NASA has. And same goes for SETI. I think SETI is another great model. Their efforts were seen as very fringe and silly, but by sticking to science and sticking to the scientific process, they were able to demonstrate that it's a legitimate science, and now it's part of the core of NASA and all of these scientific efforts, including astrobiology. And I think that we can definitely be plugged in.
As someone who's closer to this world, have you heard anything more about the NASA UAP office that they created after their study report? I haven't seen any statements from them since then.
There's one new statement that John Greenwald got in the last couple of days, but it's not positive. It turns out that the guy who was in charge of heading the UAP side of the NASA thing has not had that. He hasn't had that position for months now, and they haven't replaced him. So it seems completely dormant at NASA right now. And what I've heard, even with Arrow in the background, that it's really difficult because of this negativity, that they just get, this mountain of negativity that comes down on their head as soon as they take over a position like this, that nobody is excited about getting involved. So we've got to get past that. And kind of to your point, that's what UAP Discovery is about, is, being strong, being bold, and being that force to push away the debris and kind of create this space. And I hope that if we can demonstrate, we can create this safe space, that then they'll want to, get re-engaged.
I think you're on the right trail with finding interesting data. That's, people have made the analogy to germ theory, and I think that's pretty good. For a long time, we saw the effects of germs, but we didn't understand them. But the more we got good information that they really existed, the more it became an interesting field for us to study. And do you think that's a good comparison for UAP?
Yeah, I do. I think practically there are so many examples when it comes to science. And that's a great example where, people put too much stock in anecdotal information. Anecdotal information didn't prove that viruses were real. Someone had to do the science. You can't rely just on anecdotal information. And the examples of this go all the way back to, gorillas, meteorites, whatever. People were seeing stuff, but nobody was doing the science. As soon as people started doing the science, we made incredible discoveries that changed all of our lives. One of the most important being viruses.
Going a little bit farther out here, I think maybe I can connect a couple threads in an interesting way. You mentioned SETI, reminded me of METI, the messaging extra intelligence operation. And I was just wondering if you had heard anything or if you had any ideas yourself about the project of testing the hypothesis that we're engaging with some other forms of intelligence by attempting some form of communication to see what, if any, like response that stimulus might generate. I know we have like in the history of UFOs, we have instances of people say like flashing headlights and getting blinking lights back from what they were looking at in the sky. And I was wondering if you encountered any scientific ideas about undertaking such a project, and or if you have any yourself.
I guess yes and no, in that a lot of the wild protocols that even come out, I try just to kind of get familiar with them so I can speak to them and also see what it's all about.
What protocols, like the CE5 protocols or something?
Yeah, like CE5 is a great example. With a walkie-talkie, and I think they do flashlights. What I would highly recommend people do not do is do not shine lasers on things in the sky that you don't know what they are. Do not do that. You'll go to jail if it's an aircraft, and the likelihood it's an aircraft is very high. One of the prominent people who advises people do this claims that alien spacecraft can look like airplane. That's just asking for trouble. And even worse, it's dangerous. And imagine being a pilot who's got or even a passenger who gets shot in the eye with a laser from some goofball trying to communicate with aliens.
That's a really good point. Important safety tip.
But beyond that, I love the idea. Breakthrough, the project has had a many component to it. I'm not sure if they ditched that because some people were concerned about messaging extraterrestrials. Namely, one of the breakthrough advisors, Stephen Hawking, was famous for saying, we shouldn't be doing that because it didn't go good for the Native Americans when the Spanish came over. But what I like is Michio Kaku, Carl Sagan, a lot of other theoretical physicists or scientists who kind of speculate in this area feel like most likely civilizations go through kind of a bottleneck area, kind of like where we're in, where their ability to build technologies that can destroy themselves, grows, where they've either got to come to a place where their society is capable of, not using those technologies to destroy themselves. So there is kind of the social aspect to it. Otherwise, they don't reach that threshold. They destroy themselves and aren't able to then develop technologies to do intergalactic travel or anything like that. So I don't know if I'm as afraid of trying to contact. Now, there have been many projects out there. Even the radio, the record on Voyager is sort of that sort of project. And so far, none of those have been fruitful. But even when it comes to SETI, to assume we would understand the technologies that they would be using to communicate at vast distances is we have no clue. We really have no idea. And as I think we can all admit, we don't know much about our physical world. I mean, 90% of what's out there, what we call dark matter, we don't know what that is at all. We're completely clueless. So there's a lot out there to discover. So I'm not against it, but I've never had a situation where I felt, I've been able to connect with extraterrestrials. But sure, I'm totally open to trying anything. But I'm also open to being accurate about the results that you get or the non-results that you get with those efforts.
I'd really like to see somebody do this in a recordable way that could be publicly accessed and rigorously quantified. I think I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the sort of elephant in the UFO room, which is the experiencer phenomenon. I just wonder if you have some feelings about this and some ideas about how we can gather data around it. I've spoken to some folks. I just spoke to someone from the John Mack Institute recently, and a project that she's working on is to kind of like collate and rigorously organize the data around this topic so that we can approach it a little more scientifically and open this conversation. I don't want to characterize your position, but I have some guesses about why this isn't a central project for you, but I'm curious what your feelings are about it in general.
Yeah, you may be surprised that I do have strong feelings. I think it's an extremely important area. And the reason I feel that way is because there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who believe they're having extraterrestrial contacts or being abducted, and having these experiences. And I think for that reason, we need to, again, use some science to investigate it. In particular, I think psychologists and therapists, of which, I've worked with a couple. I was really good friends with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who is kind of a mentor of mine, and others I'm very close to. Because when I moved to take over Open Minds, we also took over the International UFO Congress, and that was a very populist event. And I didn't want to change it. Of course, my interests were more science and research, but I didn't want to change it. So when it came to kind of the ET experiencer part, I thought it was important to keep it included because that was a tradition. But I would employ the help of people like Yvonne Smith and Barbara Lamb, and others to be able to help with that side of things, and invite the guests they thought would be best and to head that up. There's a lot of good and bad with it, though. I think the good is, I think it needs to be researched. I think these people need to be respected and that we need to look into it. There's a danger in that those conferences in the community, though, can be like experiencer creator machines. And what I mean by that, there are so many people who would come to the conference and, hey, we're really curious about this topic. Then a couple of years later, they'd be like, oh, yeah, I've talked to extraterrestrials. And I'd be like, well, how did you go from not knowing anything about this to thinking? And they're like, oh, I had a session with so-and-so, and they told me, I've been talking with ETs. And then they believe that, and it becomes a part of their central system. And then, it justifies kind of this weird, kind of strange worldview where the government's letting aliens take us and abuse us and all of this kind of stuff that becomes dangerous. That I have also looked at a lot of the history behind the science or attempts at scientific investigation of these projects. And I say attempts because none of them have, in my mind, been fruitful, such as, there was a black box. You might have heard of this project where MUFON was helped out with this, where, they would put these in experiencer rooms, but they didn't get anything. Cameras in people's rooms, they don't get anything. I know Ben Hansen might disagree. He thinks as part of his show that they got a video that demonstrates someone maybe disappearing, but I just disagree with it. But so the point is that, even John Mack thought that if this is a phenomena with a third party involved, it's non-physical. And maybe that's the case. I don't know. I think we need to do a lot more research in order to figure that out. But the idea that, we can be living in a neighborhood, you're living in a neighborhood and your neighbor's being taken once a week by a UFO that hovers over the house and beams them out of their house, and nobody sees it. Not the dogs, nobody. That's kind of a big stretch. And unfortunately, it's also an area where there are a lot of charlatans, where I know for a fact, because that was one of the things that we weeded out at the Congress, is we would bring genuine researchers, but not charlatans. And I found out that there's also this charlatan machine where a lot of people were advising others to, hey, if you want to be famous in this field, say that you've been abducted by aliens, write a book about it that you self-publish, and you're going to be invited to so many conferences and sell all of these books. And they would do it. And that bred this whole community of just people making stuff up, which I've come to find is very common in the New Age kind of world. And that kind of got adopted then in the UFO community. So it's a dangerous area to tread. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of really high emotion with it. And I actually got a certification in hypnotherapy
Hmm.
for this purpose, to explore um, regression. And to me, it demonstrated regression's not a legitimate field, that the mind is just so manipulative
Hmm.
that, the whole point of hypnotic regression is to make your brain, just like a dream, manifests this false reality that deals with a particular emotional issue. And it's highly effective, in my opinion, with helping people deal with emotional issues.
Hmm.
But by its nature, it's, you know, bringing these uh, sub, these emotions that are pushed down to the surface. And I think that's what it's a lot of going on
Hmm.
with this alien abduction stuff. And if they were saying, one of the common practices is, okay, you're going to walk into a room, and in this room is going to be the person who's going to be able to solve your problem. They're going to know what to do. Person walks in the room, and you engage all their sensory perceptions. What does the room look like? What color is the room? What does the room smell like? What does the room feel like? Who is in this room to give you advice? And it's okay. It could be anybody. A lot of times when I've done this, it's someone they never would have thought of, or someone they didn't know, just some archetypal figure. And sometimes that archetypal figure can be an alien. And fortunately, in the few situations where I've been in that, these people were like, oh, I don't think I've really interacting with an alien. It was just this archetype that helped me resolve this issue. But that's the danger when they leave the room and you tell them, wow, that was really an alien, or that was really, your dead grandma, or even worse, that was really Hitler, or whatever archetypal figure they were talking to. Um, that's a manifestation of their brain, not a real thing. I'm not saying though, that I'm not open to the possibility that something's really going on, because we don't know a lot about our minds and consciousness and all of that. And there's a doctor. I forget his name right now, but someone else I was close with who unfortunately passed away, who wrote a few books on the topic and talked about, there are different types of weaker kind of signals that may be interacting with, that may be able to be interact, which may kind of explain potential psychic phenomena. And who knows, maybe something like that is going on. It's all worth exploring. And I am totally open to the possibility of some third party involvement there. So it's all worth it. I just think that, again, just like always, we should be careful of making assumptions, and, really investing in unsubstantiated information. But at the same time, we need to not disregard these people. We need to respect them. I like to put it like this. I'm not a religious person. So even when I was a kid, when I was going to church and they're saying this is the blood of Jesus or this is the body of Christ, that was weird to me. When other religious practices seemed really odd and weird to me.
Hmm.
But I've been able to respect their beliefs. I should be able to do the same thing for these people who believe they're interacting with aliens. Everybody deserves respect.
Sounds like you think it's possible that there might be some similar ratio of experiences to sightings in terms of like a genuine anomalous phenomena versus a fair amount of noise in the system. Is that a reasonable characterization?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So as we start to come toward a landing here, I'm wondering, are there outstanding big ideas in this space that you've been grappling with that you don't think I've shown a light on today? Anything that you'd like to put a gloss on, or just share that you're thinking about now at this moment in the field?
I don't know. The type of things that come to mind are, I guess, a lot of self-governance. I think a lot of, because it's even difficult for me. I mean, I like to think that I'm one of the people who has had a lot of, built a lot of bridges with a lot of people on various sides of this. And I've kept those alive, those relationships. And whereas there's a lot of tribalism that happens. And even with myself, I can get frustrated with a certain perspective or certain claims, and I've got to be like, hey, chill out, and make sure that all of my communications are respectful and grounded. And I have not been above apologizing if I overstep, and because we all can make mistakes. But and I think we all need to try to be strong and self-govern ourselves and make sure that before we hit send on that post, is this really what I want to say? Is this really adding to the conversation? Is this bringing any positive kind of constructiveness to the conversation? And I think we really need to do that. Just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean they're the enemy or they're a bad person. And I try to use the example as in my experience, you're rarely going to find two UFO researchers that believe the same thing. We all disagree with each other, about something or another. I would say like David Marler and I are probably closest to line, but even we disagree on stuff, which means, all of my other friends that people know out there, like John Greenwald or Ben Hansen or something, I disagree with them even more stuff. So, but I love those guys. They're my buddies. We're all colleagues in this. I'm a friend with a lot of people, and sometimes people are shocked. Why is Alejandro hanging out with that guy? I thought they were enemies. No, just because we disagree doesn't mean we're enemies. So I think that that's really important. I hope, I almost feel like speaking to the void because it feels like this situation is worse now than it's ever been. That and the people turning their back on science and the scientific process. People want transparency so much and openness. That is a bedrock, issue for science. Science is best done, and scientists want to do their work in an open, transparent manner. They want their work beat up because they want to prove I made a novel discovery and none of you can prove that I'm wrong, So come in and take take your best shot. I'm right. And that's the kind of, it's the openness that we have in science. That's where I think science is really the most kind of important space for this to move all into. And I'm excited for that possibility. So, I guess those are some of the things that I mentioned. And I would like to say, just because, when it comes to sightings, and we see it a lot, and I kind of touching on the SpaceX stuff. So I do want to kind of touch on that in that there's a lot more junk in the sky right now. Some of the most amazing videos we've received, it's not talked about much, but when the spacecraft after the launch, which is already, we get tons of UFO videos from the launch, which we all know looks spectacular. This giant jellyfish, space jellyfish that you can see across several states. I mean, it blows my mind that there's been 3 times now where I walked outside to go to the supermarket, probably because it's right for dinner, right after dusk in the winter. And there's a SpaceX rocket that is taking up the entire sky in Arizona. And this thing's launched in California. So there's that part. But also the spacecraft itself goes around the world a few times. And when it does that, it drops off the satellites. I think you said you had seen one of those satellite trains. When they're first dropped off, they're really tiny. So it looks like a luminous tube. Several pilots, there's a paper that was written that mistakenly, was first came out at SCU that it was a UFO. It was actually a MUFON case. And then some debunkers saw it, and rightfully so, said, hey, no, that's Starlink. And we figured out that that's a Starlink phenomenon. We've got several of those. But also the spacecraft that drops them off, it will put its thrusters on a couple times. Mostly it'll put its thrusters on to slow down. It'll also turn around. Well, actually, it's going straight. It'll put on its thrusters to slow down. It'll turn around and then slow down more. The entire time it's creating the smoke around it. It looks incredible. When it puts on its thruster, we've got several videos, and I've got a YouTube video of Starlink and UAP where you can see this. It looks like this burst. It's out of sci-fi. This giant burst comes out of it like a shield. That's really cool looking. And so, don't assume what you're saying is just just because it's crazy looking. Our skies are getting filled more and more with crazy stuff. Before Starlink started launching their satellites, there was something like 2,000 up there. Now there's well over 6,000. And that number is climbing quickly. So, for better or worse, the sky's getting full of crazy stuff, which makes it even more important that we deploy more sensor systems, better systems, and begin to delineate, figure out what's up there.
I guess to this point, I have to ask you about New Jersey drones just before I let you go. We got the White House saying this is all FAA approved, but we have the FAA on record telling Congress we don't know what's going on with this stuff. What do you make of that contradiction? And have you seen anything interesting from your perch of video retrieval?
Yeah, this one is one that is kind of debated in the office, and so that's why I get. But to be honest, so the FBI and the FAA early on very clearly stated that we've investigated the cases, and they're largely aircraft. The very few drones that we've seen are flying in airspace where it's perfectly legal for them to fly. Then, of course, we had a lot of back and forth going. Most people ignored that statement because of this furor going on with drones. The whole time it's been confusing to me because my question for the general public is, what is your concern with drones? All of a sudden, you think everything in the sky is drones. It's okay to fly drones. I've got literally a drone right here that I can fly outside of my house at any time, and there's no problem. But if someone gets a video of it, somehow it's interesting. I think there's a lot of confusion going on. Now, the concern was drones over secured airspace, in particular military facilities, which the U.S. government has said this has been a problem in several facilities, including Langley, a base in Germany, I think a couple other bases where they've written press releases where this is a problem. Those are the big concerns. But in New Jersey, when I looked at the sightings that we've gotten, I saw a lot of airplanes. And that was my biggest concern, is all of a sudden, and if you live here in Phoenix, there's crazy lights in your sky all the time because we've got an airport there, one of the biggest airports in the country over there. We have an Air Force base over here. We have an Air Force proving ground behind here where they're dropping flares and doing all kinds of crazy stuff all the time. We've got Mesa Police, where I live. They have 7 police helicopters. They do loan them out to the entire East Valley, so they're helping other counties or other towns as well. But the point is, there's stuff flying around all the time. And so when I was looking at videos, it felt like people were feeling empowered to start to upload these and say they're strange when they really weren't. So I saw a ton of aircraft. I saw exactly what the FBI and the FAA said. A ton of drones, a ton of aircraft. The very few drones were flying in airspace where it's perfectly okay for them to fly. And I think that when the new administration last week, or things are happening so quickly, it feels like a month ago, but it was only like a week ago. But when they came out and made their statement, my opinion, by following their messaging and how they do things, is I think they were just restating what the FAA and the FBI had said using different words, but unfortunately words that could be interpreted differently. But regardless, the same essential thing. When they were saying that, some of these drones for research or whatever, they were just saying what they had said before. All of the drones that we had seen had already been certified and approved. Like even this drone, I've had to submit, and I have to have a number on my drone because that's what you're legally supposed to do. So everything they saw was legally registered, including research drones and other drones that were going on in the area. So yeah, I really believe I saw Mick West, everybody's favorite, skeptic. He posted a politician who was really upset, saying this was all hysteria and ridiculous. And I kind of agree with that perspective, in that, this was, and it's not foreign for us UFO researchers. We see this sort of hysteria where there's a big story in an area and all of a sudden you get a bunch of sightings from that area. but those sightings aren't always good sightings. They're just people submitting. So just because people are reporting something doesn't mean they're right about what they're reporting, and it doesn't mean what they're reporting there's an increase in anomalous activity. You have to be really careful with this stuff. And if you ask some of the researchers like Robert Powell or like a Mark Rodiger or some of these other people who have watched these trends and have done studies on these trends, which is what we did at MUFON the entire time. And what I do with Enigma is that you'll see a lot of this activity and people behavior is due to spikes in interests or a lot of people getting excited about something, but not necessarily the type of thing we want them to get us excited about, something truly anomalous. I would say, speaking of Robert Powell, Stephenville was one of the cases where that happened. Both of us were at MUFON on the time. I was doing PR. Stephenville was a big story, and I didn't know why, because you had one or two witnesses who didn't really have any videos or anything, whereas I had a great case in San Diego at the time I was trying to get the press interested in. Stephenville blew up, but we had some great researchers like Robert Powell, and I can't remember the radar expert he worked with, but they were able to get radar data and demonstrate there was something anomalous, something more strange than we thought going on there. But that was a rare case where there was a result that buttressed a anomalous, perhaps a situation, rather than, just kind of more noise in the system. And I think Jersey was noise. And if you want to argue that, I would say, where's a video? One video that shows something anomalous in Jersey. I haven't seen one. And you don't see a bunch of people saying, look at this video, look at this video, look at this video. And Lord knows I was looking because I wanted to find those videos but I think it's kind of cool too that our data actually jived with the FBI and the FAA. So their investigators had, kind of discovered the same things I had discovered. So looking at our data. So I think that's a good thing. I think that's positive that, we're all on the same page when we actually look at the data. And, and I don't know about you, but I just have not seen any data demonstrating any drones coming in and out of secure airspace or drones the size of a car or a bus. Instead, we see aircraft. And even worse, we had politicians uploading videos of stars, one of the most common constellations, Orion, and thinking that was something anomalous.
Oh boy, I do sometimes scroll through videos on like TikTok or whatever, but it's a messy moment. Everybody's reporting, and AI is taking off, so it's hard to pull the wheat from the chaff, and that's why I'm so grateful that you are out there doing that in a really rigorous way. I have to let you go, but I just wanted to ask where you would like people to engage with your work. Should they download Enigma? Should they go check out UAP Discovery? Should they reach out to you on a platform other than X, or where do you like people to find you?
Yeah, 3 places, unfortunately, but definitely download Enigma. It's a free app. The tools that it provides you would have to pay several other apps to get all of the tools you can get with this one free app. We're already on Apple, and we're going to be on Android within the next couple weeks. In fact, We're deploying Android in some places. We're beta testing Android. We'll be on Android momentarily. We're also going to be beefing up our website, but our website's still a great resource for like historical information, and we're blogging all of the time. So definitely download Enigma. The website's enigmalabs.io. I guess the most central place you can find all of my stuff is at openminds.tv. I have a Patreon, and that I'm going to be more active on, but I'm posting videos and telling people all about all of that stuff at openminds.tv, on YouTube, and on all of my social medias for Open Minds. And then finally, UAP Discovery. This is for the science nerds, but if you want to do some nerding out, some science nerding out, I mean, how much fun, talk to people, build some sensor systems, or at least just do some analysis or help to learn about scientific analysis of UAP cases, you can do that at UAP Discovery, uapdiscovery.org.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, expertise today, Alejandro. I really appreciate you just holding a moment for this. And I'm a big fan of your work. So thank you so much for leading the charge in this exciting field.
Thank you so much for having me and for your kind words.
And that's the show. Thank you for watching or listening. Please support us on patreon.com/WTUFO, patreon.com/WTUFO. That will increase the odds that the show continues to exist. If you're listening in a podcast format, you can also rate and review us on your podcast player of choice. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can like and subscribe. It also never hurts to tell a friend about us or pop us in a social feed. Maybe if you have a favorite episode, you could share it on a thread somewhere. Thank you again for watching, listening, enjoying, and supporting, and I hope you're all having a great day.